And we now take you live to the Rajya Sabha, where Finance Minister Arun Jaitley is speaking.
That in the absence of any process or a due process, there is, on the prima facie, could be a violation of right of privacy, and therefore that challenge on the grounds of right of privacy is a right which is pending before a 5-judge bench of the court. Now let us first of all deal with this right of privacy. The Constitution as a document doesn't use the word privacy. So the constitutional text doesn't mention privacy as a fundamental right. The original interpretation given by the Supreme Court used to be, and through the 1950s, the interpretation by a very large bench was, particularly when the cases came up in the context of policemen going and making midnight knocks at houses, that privacy is not a fundamental right. There were clear pronouncements. Subsequently, a smaller bench of the court said that probably privacy is a fundamental right. The 5-judge bench now is dealing with a theoretical question. I don't think we've appointed a commentator in this house as yet. Yeah, so let me have a say. Please, let me first beat your argument.
Let the minister finish. Let the minister finish.
You can't curtail my right to comment on what you're saying. That is an attack on personal liberty again.
Let us not argue on that. Don't argue on that.
So Mr. Sitaram Yechury will sit here, give a running commentary when everybody speaks, and nobody can ask him to allow the House to proceed in order. It's going on in order, but then please have a say. The others may also be speaking some sense. You can't have this kind of intellectual arrogance.
No, okay. Let's not argue.
Arrogance.
Yeah.
You are displaying an authoritarian arrogance of not even willing to listen to the other point of view.
Let me, sir. Let me
let him finish. Let the minister finish. Okay.
Let me now just liven Mr. Sitaram Yechury and his colleagues a little. Somebody has sent me anonymously a few lines which I want to read for his benefit, because these kind of comments from him and his friends keep coming. And this is in the context of a larger debate. I am deviating from the point I was making. And the comment which has been sent to me, I'm sorry, I am deviating from the subject a little. If you criticize me, it is your freedom of speech. If I criticize you, it is my intolerance. It's a very nice text. I think I'll pass on a copy to you to read the full text. But
privately tell me who's that anonymous writer.
I still don't know.
I still don't know.
Okay, you can do it privately. Now you.
But surely somebody who disagrees with you. So, sir, the question the court was considering is privacy the conflict between those benches in the absence of any law? Is privacy a fundamental right or not? The present bill presupposes and is based on a premise that it's too late in the day to contend that privacy is not a fundamental right. So I do accept that probably privacy is a fundamental right. Now, where do you fit in privacy as a fundamental right? And that is where I want to clear the misconception behind some of the amendments which have also been proposed in this debate which is on. It is contended, and broadly it is now accepted, that privacy is a part of individual liberty. So when Article 21 says, no person shall be deprived of his right of life and liberty without procedure established by law. So let us assume that privacy is a part of liberty, and no person shall be deprived of his privacy without procedure established by law. The underlying point is that privacy is not an absolute right. It's a right even in our constitution, if it's a fundamental right in Article 21, which is subject to a restriction that it can be restricted by a procedure established by law. Now, that procedure established by law obviously has to be a fair, just, and reasonable procedure. The case before the Supreme Court is, you have no law, you have not legislated, you have not laid down any guidelines, and you have by an executive fiat created an authority where all the personal data and biometric information will go in. What will that be used for? Is this a fair, just, and reasonable procedure? The UPA government, therefore, was well advised to come out with a legislation. They came out with a legislation. The UPA legislation was, and I'll separately deal with the privacy provisions. The UPA legislation was that a UID authority will be created. A UID authority, there'll be a procedure how the authority is created. There'll be a procedure how personal details are taken and the storage of those personal details, the storage of those biometrics, and when can that information be shared and in what manner. That was the UPA law, in effect. That law kept on being discussed between committees, etc. The law, unfortunately, could not be passed. What that information will be eventually used for, what is the purpose of that information, that was absent in the UPA law. So there was no detailed chapter in the UPA law. Maybe they thought subsequently by rules and otherwise they could explain what that information will be used for. Now, I'm not criticizing that law because since it was the beginning of a thought process that you need the unique identity number and you will use this unique identity number for some purpose. So obviously there were some gaps, and with passage of time that law itself could be improved. The present law in pith and substance is completely different. It borrows the complete idea from the UPA law that you need a unique identity number. And to that extent, I give them all the credit for it. That was an idea which was rightly created. There'll be some personal details, there'll be some core biometric details. Compared to the UPA law, and I'll subsequently demonstrate, there's a very strict procedure. The privacy law is much more tightened. And the core purpose of this law is that both center and state governments give several subsidies to people. There are monetary assistances given, there are cost rebates given, there are subsidies given which are worth thousands and thousands, almost lakhs of crores. Now, the purpose of these subsidies is that these have to be quantified amounts given to identifiable sections. If subsidies are given as unquantified amounts to unidentified section, then non-merit people will get the subsidies, the merit will not get it. And from the public exchequer, you will keep spending money, which doesn't go to the targeted people, which goes to the people who don't deserve subsidies. So today, every central government, every state government, in some way or the other is assisting the people by way of subsidies. So you are entitled to take a UID identification, but if you want the benefit of that subsidy, production of the UID identity or any other alternative document is a condition precedent.
Sir, one point. Sorry, Mr. I'm only saying we are on a motion of thanks. I mean, sorry, on a, what I've read is an objection on the basis of the rules. This is the content of the bill he's explaining, sir.
Yes, yes, I have to...
So are you allowing the introduction?
No.
I'm asking him. Are you
Sir,
allowing
under the rules, there is no
That I have to
introduction required, it's a
indicate.
transmission.
So you have ruled.
No.
Ruled on my point of order.
That I already told you.
It's a transmission, it's not an introduction.
Honorable Minister, one minute. See, I have already told you, the position is that the bill is introduced in the Lok Sabha and it is transmitted to us after passing there. So we have to, I am bound to take it up. There is no provision in the rule to object the consideration at this point of time. You could have objected, you can object only when a bill is introduced in this house, but you cannot, this is not introduced in the, this is introduced there, passed there and transmitted it. So I am bound to allow the, and therefore I have called him to move the motion, to move for consideration. I already called him.
No, I disagree with you on that point. But anyway, I disagree with you according to our own rules.
You can.
I disagree with you.
That I
want
problem.
that to be on record. But since you have permitted now.
Yeah, I have permitted.
Also,
I already
my only request through you to the Honourable Minister is to explain also the reasons why this had to be considered as a money bill.
Yes.
Why did it have to be considered as a money bill? Why are you doing?
If
all
I'm
that you're
entitled,
saying
interruption
is a money bill.
If I am entitled an interruption-free right to address the Parliament,
you may
I'll certainly meet all the questions that Mr. Yachuri has said.
on introduction, on motion.
Therefore, the nature of this bill is, the core of this bill or the pith and substance of this bill is that government monies are being spent by centre and state governments. When you spend that money, in order to ensure that money reaches the right man, you insist on the identity of the person. And the other provisions in the bill are how that identity is going to be determined. Now, 2 or 3 questions which arise, which I may prima facie like to satisfy these honourable members of this House. The first is which Mr. Yachuri raised. Because to an unlegislated executive decision, a challenge on Article 21 is pending, the House must suspend its power to legislate. My respectful submission is, it's an unsustainable argument. Parliament will not voluntarily abrogate its authority, it will not surrender or squander its authority, merely because some case is pending in a court.
So the argument of sub judice is not validated. There's nothing called sub judice.
Sub judice on a legislation?
No, that's what I'm asking you. You have used that argument so many times. You have used that argument so many times.
Sir.
Matter is sub judice.
Sir, sub judice is an argument which is available when issues of individual culpability are pending in court. You don't prejudice a trial or a hearing in a court by discussing it in a parliamentary forum. So tomorrow, if Article 356 is imposed and somebody challenges it in court, you will say it must not come up before Parliament for ratification because the challenge is pending, the matter is sub judice. Can it ever be a sustainable argument? There are issues where important political and constitutional issues are pending challenge before the court. Legislative bodies don't lose their right to discuss those issues. The sub judice rule today has to be construed as applicable to matters of individual culpability so that we don't prejudice trials. Therefore, the best way, if Mr. Yachuri's argument is accepted, that somebody should file a petition challenging an issue in court and then says Parliament has lost its right to legislate because Supreme Court has taken over. If that were to happen, then you would have a third chamber, the Supreme Court, to legislate, and both houses of Parliament itself would lose their authority.
Sir, if you permit me, I entirely agree with you. I entirely agree with you.
Therefore, allow me to proceed on the next point.
But I want...
Yachuri ji.
No, sir.
Let him finish. Yachuri ji, let him finish. Yachuri ji, let him finish. Then I will allow you. Let him finish. I will allow you. Let him finish. I will allow you. Let him finish. Yes. Let him finish.
Therefore, sir,
yeah, please.
Merely because an unlegislated executive action of the government has been challenged before a court, Parliament does not lose its right to legislate. That's absolutely clear. It's as clear as daylight. Second, why is it a money bill? And that is a question that Mr. Naresh Agrawal raised. Though this House, in my respectful submission, doesn't have, should not have been on a matter of propriety discussing it since it has been raised and a contention made, Article 110 defines what a money bill is. Subclause C of Article 110 is absolutely clear that if monies flow into the Consolidated Fund of India, and if monies are spent out of the Consolidated Fund of India, and a law in pith and substance deals with that matter, it becomes a money bill. What if that law has several other provisions? Will it cease to be a money bill? That's a question. Now, the first Lok Sabha was faced with this issue because Article 110 uses a word only if. So only being a narrower phrase, must the bill only deal with a taxation provision? Must it only deal with an expenditure provision and have no other provision? Therefore, the first Lok Sabha was confronted with this question, and Mr. Mavlankar gave a detailed ruling to say that there is no law which can ever be framed which is a one-section law. And that one-section law says there shall be a tax for the following. When you say there will be a tax for the following purpose, you will need an administrative machinery for the levy of that tax, for the collection of that tax, for the appointment of taxing officers, for an appeal provision, and for the general administration of the tax. Now, will those provisions which provide for administration of that taxation render a money bill to be a non-money bill? That was the question, and Mr. Mavlankar clearly gave a ruling. The answer is no. It will remain a money bill if the principal purpose of that bill is to impose a tax and the incidental provisions. And if you now read Article 110C read with Article 110G, G means any other power incidental to the main purpose. So the purpose of the present bill is money spent out of the Consolidated Fund of India, which go towards the expenditure of subsidies, makes it a money bill. The administrative machinery around it makes it under subclause G a provision incidental to the administration of that money bill. And Article 110.3 clearly says, in this matter, it is the satisfaction of the Speaker of the Lok Sabha which is final. And since it is final on a matter of propriety,
Yes, that is all.
in a bicameral house,
We cannot discuss that. No. That
it
question,
doesn't happen.
no, that question cannot. No, Honorable Minister only explains. I am not allowing to dispute that whether it is money. Let him complete. No, please. No, please.
Sir,
I have given the ruling. It's money bill as per the certification of this Honorable
therefore,
Speaker.
sir,
We have to obey that.
नरेश जी, एक मिनट,
बैठिए,
मैं इसको और स्पष्टता से मैं समझा देता हूं. The test to be applied is merely because there is a provision that we have created a particular authority and monies will be provided from the Consolidated Fund of India for that authority will not make it a money bill. Supposing a development authority is created and the funds are to be met from the Consolidated Fund of India, in pith and substance, the bill deals with the creation of the development authority and its functioning. Providing funds is incidental. It won't be a money bill. That's the answer to Mr. Raja's question. But if the principal purpose is money spent out of Consolidated Fund of India have to be spent in a particular manner, and a machinery is created for spending that money, then Article 110C read with Article 110G, that is, spending money out of the Consolidated Fund of India and any other matter incidental thereto, the machinery created is a matter which is incidental thereto, and therefore that is why it's a money bill. This satisfaction to that effect has to be of the speaker. And therefore, once a speaker satisfies herself and says, I certify it's a money bill, this money bill then is transmitted to this House. It will be a money bill and no authority in the country can question that provision. Yeah. Now comes the third question. How is this bill different from the one that the UPA brought in? The UPA bill, because this whole thought process, it's grown. The UPA bill provided for, it conceived of an idea, and it was a welcome idea. And I must straight away concede, Dr. Saab is here, that at that time some of my colleagues probably had reservations. And there were several questions we used to raise. When new ideas come up, doubts will come up. That every Indian must be given a unique identity. Issues of citizenship came up. And these are legitimate issues. The UPA bill at that time confined itself, let's create an authority. Mr. Nilikani was created as the authority. He brought in the technology, he brought in the expertise. And then core information, core biometric information and personal data will be fed in. Some privacy provisions, and the bill stopped with that. It wasn't a money bill. It was a bill only for the creation of a UID authority. That bill today stands altered. One principal idea is borrowed from that bill, that UID will be the machinery under which will be used for distribution of government money as subsidies. But the core purpose of the bill will be how is money to be spent. And so that the money is spent in a targeted manner, it must reach the persons to whom the benefits are to be conferred. And those persons are the persons who are entitled to the subsidies. Now, questions have been raised. Each central government, each state government, I have seen in the LPG, where the direct benefit transfer has been used, 25% has been saved. These 5 crore families which will get it is actually free gas connection, will get it from the money saved from this. State governments of Telangana, state governments of Andhra Pradesh, they have already started using this in several other areas itself. So every state government will then be able to ensure that subsidies reach the right person itself. That's the whole object. Now, one question which has been raised, and I have seen a lot of articles coming, which are articles which mention, oh, the privacy provisions have been violated. Now, first of all, and I have seen my good friend Jairam has proposed, along with some other members, several amendments to the bill. I have, in fact, analyzed each one of his amendments. I'll address the House after he moves those amendments. Most of those amendments are against the UPA bill itself. So what were the provisions of the UPA bill today are being damned by these amendments, and we have borrowed those ideas. I think where Jairam stands on these issues depends on where he sits. If he sits this side, his stand is different. If he sits the other side, his stand is different.
Thank you. I have not changed my mind on Aadhar.
Sir, if I look at the earlier UPA bill, the privacy provisions, we are committed, and let us now, therefore, first of all, let's move on a constitutional premise clarity. I am moving on a premise A, that privacy is a fundamental right, without bothering for the Supreme Court's constitution bench judgment. B, it's a right which is a part of individual liberty. see that liberty, that is a right of privacy, will depend on a procedure established by law, and therefore this law is establishing that procedure. The only question is that procedure fair, just and reasonable? Now, if you see the UPA law, and if you see it from Chapter 6, Clause 30 downwards, you had several provisions of confidentiality, and then you created a mechanism by which that confidentiality and privacy itself can be breached. The UPA law created this. The present law now restricts itself to two situations. A person by his consent can say that my personal data can be shared, so you need his consent. But his biometric data can't even be shared with consent. The core biometric data. So it's a much tighter provision. The UPA law spoke in terms of authorities which are created, which can then say that on grounds of mention in the bill, under special circumstances, some data can be shared. What have we done? The only ground on which data can be shared is national security. And who will decide that national security? One authority will be created in Delhi. That authority will be headed by an officer of a certain category. And then the decision of that authority will be reviewed by a committee headed by the cabinet secretary. So an authority headed by creating such a tight provision, is that tight provision which we have created by legislation, is that procedure established by law? Is that a fair, just and reasonable procedure? The answer is yes, it is. Now, if we look at the entire history of similar legislations, sir, a legislation of this kind for the first time came, I've seen in the United States. In the United States, the Social Security number legislation was first created, which is an equivalent of Aadhar, in 1935. So we are already 80 years behind times. Now, 80 years behind time, this was repeatedly challenged. Same debate took place 80 years ago. And over 80 years, they've been adding. I have a list. For income tax, they made it compulsory. For some policies, they made it compulsory. For buying bonds, they made it compulsory. For a lot of economic activity, they made it compulsory. For possessing arms, they made it compulsory. So there is a list running into 10 pages where they kept expanding it from time to time. Now, this has helped them in matters of national security. It has repeatedly been challenged in the US. Does this violate the due process? Because in America, just as we use the word procedure established by law, they use the word due process of law. Though I must concede that now with Supreme Court interpretation, the two almost mean the same. It has repeatedly been challenged, and on every occasion the United States, which is a liberal democracy, has conceded. Their courts have said, yes, national security is a good ground. In fact, they went on to say, a person may need to make a choice between receiving a government benefit and adhering to religious beliefs. So you have to choose that if you want government benefits, you need this. But some information, if it is required for national security, can always be shared with national security. There's a series of challenges which resulted in that. Now, sir, in a nutshell, if I take all these objections, the purpose of this bill is distribution of government monies by subsidies. Yes. The rest is incidental, so it's a money bill. Two, merely because executive action challenge is pending in the Supreme Court. This Parliament cannot suspend its right to legislate. And 3, learning from the UPA experience and the kind of debate which took place, we have further tightened the privacy laws much more than what the UPA had in its bill. I am straight away conceding that the debate evolved, so we learned from our experience. And the only ground now is national security, which every member has to agree gives way to an individual's right, has to give way to national security, and therefore this House must accept the recommendation in relation to a money bill of the House of People.
No, you move the motion. You say I move the bill. I move the motion for consideration.
Sir, I move that the Aadhar Targeted Delivery of Financial and Other Subsidies Benefit Services Bill 2016 be approved by this House.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I think, no, actually you speak first, because now for discussion.
Part
Yes,
of discussion.
you can speak first. Yeah, we are taking, because it is already moved for consideration. So,
sir, I'm underlying the word moved.
bill is moved.
So
It is moved for consideration.
So you were telling me earlier it's not moved here. It is
No, I
only
already said
transmitted.
it's now moved.
No, you insisted on moving.
Yeah, otherwise I cannot.
Please underline. Note the
No, I am bound to move it. I am bound to allow, because I said, no, I have, Yechuri, Mr. Yechuri, I made it very clear that since the bill is transmitted from Lok Sabha, after having passed in the Lok Sabha, I am bound to allow to move it. Because no objection, no, all your objections you can raise when you speak, and that I am allowing you to speak first. And your party has 6 minutes, you can take 6 minutes.
Sir.
No. No objection. I said no objection will stand. I gave it ruling twice. Objection will not stand. I said.
What, you want to speak for?
No, see.
Tell him.
See.
Yeah.
Sitaram Yechury. Now, listen. No. Whether it is Sitaram Yechury, I am making it very clear. I have said here twice that objection with regard to moving for consideration does not stand, because it is a bill transmitted from Lok Sabha. The chair is bound to allow. Chair has no other option. Chair can allow a discussion, and then your objection you say while you discuss. You can say anything. You say it is whatever you want. You say I am allowing, Sri Yechury ji.
तो आधार बिल राज्यसभा में पेश कर दिया गया है, और इस बिल को पेश करते वक्त इस बिल की क्या क्या खासियतें हैं वो वित्त मंत्री अरुण जेटली की ओर से बताई गई, और अब